Angel is brought to you by LinkedIn. You already know LinkedIn as the world's largest professional network. It's also a better way to find great talent. Go to linkedin.com/angel and get a $50 credit towards your first job post. Terms and conditions apply. And Embroker. The Embroker Startup Program helps startups secure the most important lines of insurance at a lower cost and with less hassle. For guaranteed 10% off on premiums and up to 20% depending on quote, go to embroker.com/angel.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Season 3 of Angel, the podcast. Yes, this is the Angel podcast, which is a complement, an ongoing discussion for my book, Angel, which you may have read. If you haven't, where have you been? angelthebook.com, now in 3 or 4 languages, Japanese, Chinese, English, and about 7 more languages to go. If you want to hang out with me, Jason Calacanis, investor in 7 unicorns, the mother of all unicorns, you can come to angel.university. I'm going on tour to visit the East Coast, and then we're going to be doing Sydney in June. We're going to be doing Angel University, which is just a 5-hour course on angel investing for about 25 to 50 people in the room. Sometimes we go as high as 75, sometimes as low as just 20. And it's a great course. I teach it with my friend Mike Savino. And what we're trying to do is just explain to you early stage investing. It's something that is incredibly opaque, and you've probably been hit up many times by friends and family. Hey, invest in this company, meet this founder. What you have to realize is that if you're on the outside and you're seeing deal flow, in all likelihood, it's the deal flow that has been passed over by the top investors. In other words, you're investing in the anti-portfolio. That's why you need to get educated. That's why you need to read my book, which will cost you 10 or 20 bucks. If you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. You can send the book back. And you should come to the course and learn. And you should watch this free podcast. We've now done 2 seasons. This is our 3rd season. So we'll have 30 interviews for you to listen to from world-class investors. And today will be no different. Matt Ocko is somebody I've been watching and studying for decades here in Silicon Valley. He is the co-founder of Data Collective with Zach Bogue, who is Miss Marissa Mayer. For people who don't know, he is the husband of the famed Marissa Mayer, CEO of Yahoo. Welcome to the program, Matt Ocko.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
So just to give people a little bit of background, I know you've been doing this for 2-3 decades now.
25 years.
25 years of investing. Give us some broad strokes. How did you start in investing? And tell us the scope of your activities today.
Okay. So I got my start because I worked with a friend on actually the precursor to Adobe Acrobat. So he and one friend wrote almost all of the technology that Adobe, what's the polite way of putting it, paid homage to in the development of Acrobat. And it turned out that his godfather and longtime family friend ran, I guess in today's dollars, nearly $1 billion evergreen fund. And he was looking for a young, crazy technologist to scout deals in Silicon Valley. And the only quid pro quo was that I had to live roughly half-time in Toronto, Canada in the early 90s.
Wow.
And so I had 2 cars, 2 places to live, 2 sets of furniture, 2 big screen TV indulgences, and no social life. So I was the loneliest investor that you could find.
So you just had this like solo LP who just put you in business and said, "Hey, start making investments."
Well, he was a fascinating guy. He was, I think, the secret model for the most interesting man in the world. On a lark, he walked naked and daubed with ritual paint into a cave in Western Africa with a tribal leader and walked out with $1 billion gold deal. He opened and backed the first McDonald's in Russia. He'd made and lost, I think, 3 or 4 $1 billion.
Wait, what's the name of this guy?
It's a guy named Ben Webster.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a brilliant, charismatic, lovely guy. Unfortunately, he passed from cancer in kind of the mid to late 90s. But it was essentially his money and a few select outside LPs, and he could do whatever he wanted, which was a fantastic way to start a career.
Wow. So you get this mentorship. And then today, give us the scale of your operations. You invest in how many companies a year, what's your average check size, the range, and what do you look for? What is your thesis these days?
So my life is split into my day job, which is DCVC. We're a deep tech focused fund. We're looking for a technology that's powered by a unique algorithmic edge that has a massive CapEx and OpEx advantage against proprietary data in a scary, large industry, ideally disdained by others, that when it works, transforms or upends that industry.
So deep tech.
Deep tech.
In difficult markets.
In difficult markets.
And the reason you want to go into difficult markets is what? Because most people would say, oh, music industry, oh, construction, oh, education, oh, healthcare, oh, the military. These are industries filled with incumbents and it's too slow. And you're saying you want to go into the slow, protected, moated, giant incumbent space, which sounds like a recipe for failure.
It looks scary, but our job is to produce extraordinary alpha. Our LPs aren't happy unless our funds in aggregate are returning a minimum of 3 times cash on cash and ideally 5, 6, 7 or better. And
over a decade-long life.
Yeah, over 10 to 12 years. And one of the things that we observe, because we're data-driven guys, the history of our name is evident in Data Collective, is that the risk and capital for being in the 4th Wi-Fi chip deal, the 5th flash storage deal, the 7th click 3 hearts on a survey to show that you're not a disgruntled employee, fluffy SaaS deal, is actually the same, if not greater, because of a lack of differentiation, because of access to the market by an endless array of venture-funded competitors, because the path to success is clear to every possible competitor. And by the way, once you're in the market, success is relatively stochastic, even with a very good CEO and
stochastic.
Yes.
Wow.
Meaning,
first time I've gotten a word on the podcast I didn't know. Stochastic. I get a stoic in there, kind of. No? Explain the epistemology of this. Yes.
A fancy word meaning largely random.
Largely random.
Exactly.
I'm understanding your thesis here, Matt. You're saying that because there is so much attention towards what I'll call the clearer path to victory, the easier business. I'm going to build a SaaS product like Jason Lemkin's investing in SaaS because there's so many people who want to do that because it feels less risky. It feels like there's less downside because there's so many people going after it. Now there is more downside because too many people are chasing the same piece of cheese.
Exactly.
Whereas in your space, because so many people are scared of doing deep tech in difficult markets with incumbents, it actually evens out or maybe even gets better.
Right. So if you look at what you're aiming for, so I'll use another fancy word, fractal. So if you look at the weird kind of repetition of the power law that exists at the tail end of the power law curve, you say, okay, in that long tail of scary, hard to understand stuff, what produces monopolies? It actually turns out that getting a monopoly or at least oligopoly scale return is less risky when you have a lower price because nobody understands what the heck you're doing in the industry or what the
lower valuation of the company.
Yeah, lower entry price. You spend less money on internecine warfare. The company
what does that mean?
Means you're not fighting 73 other companies all taking your prices down to zero.
Got it.
In a desperate bid to survive a grueling 2-year enterprise checklist sale, right? So that's another characteristic of the markets that we're in. If you do a deep tech company and it's successful, almost by definition, it has life or death technology. So, one of our companies, in fact, one that I'm very proud of. It's not my deal. My colleague Scott Barkley sits on the board. It's a company called MIC Medical Informatics, and they built machine learning algorithms against a huge proprietary data set in neonatal intensive care units and pediatric intensive care units. And so without any new equipment, without new doctors, new nurses, without radical changes to procedures, apples to apples in major hospitals, they've reduced death rates for the most vulnerable patients anywhere between 30 and 50%. That's hundreds of kids going home with their parents alive when the outcome would have been otherwise, and moreover with high quality of life, because the algorithms can predict hours to days to weeks ahead of time before the alarms go off shrieking, code blue, before doctors and nurses are forced to make horrific decisions with poor data in very small amounts of time. This forestalls all of that.
By studying what? Like the blood sugar level, the heart rate?
Everything. Every one of those machines. And so not only that, but the machine's alarms are now turned off so the kids sleep, they're not stressed, they're healing faster. So that's in a very difficult area.
What's the name of that company again?
MIC Medical Informatics Corp.
Right.
But my point is, no one is going to shut that off, right?
No.
Now that it works,
it's essential,
right?
So that's the bet. If this works, the bet you're making as an investor is to say, this is going to be very hard. It's going to be a long time to figure out if this deep technology works, but if it does, you can't not use it.
Exactly.
All right. When we get back from this break, I want you to take me through what process Data Collective uses to figure out if this company, which obviously if it's deep tech, doesn't have a product in market. How do you qualify a company without traction, without a product in market for investment at the Data Collective when we get back on Angel the Podcast? If you need to hire somebody, go to LinkedIn. That's how I'm finding all my great people. Charles, who works with us in the studio and records This Week in Startups, we found him. He had a full-time job, but he was a passive job seeker. What that means is he wasn't out there actively looking, but when he was on LinkedIn getting messages from his friends and updating his profile and reading the news, he saw an ad for the studio director position for This Week in Startups. And he said, that looks interesting. That podcast, I listened to it. Oh, wow, they have an opening? Let me take a look. Let me just browse through this opportunity. And you know what happened? He clicked and he applied. And we found somebody who wasn't looking for a job. In a low unemployment situation like we have in the United States, if people are out there looking, they're the last 2 or 3% of people who are trying to find jobs. The most experienced people are in high demand, and you want to find those passive job seekers, and that's what we did. We have hired, I think, 3 people now. Our marketing manager, Maureen, up in Toronto, and we do this through LinkedIn. So here's what I want you to do. I want to give you $50 right now, a fitty from Jason, linkedin.com/angel. Go to linkedin.com/angel, and you will get $50 off your first job post, linkedin.com/angel. It works. It's amazing. I'm telling you this because I want you to find great talent and because I did. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Okay, welcome back to the front that is my podcasting career. On this podcast, I bring people who are smarter than me under the false pretense that they're going to be sharing with you, my audience, their insights, their information, and their wisdom. This is a giant fraud. I am coming clean for the first time. I have people like Matt Ocko on the podcast in order to educate me, Jason Calacanis, the mother of all unicorns, one of the greatest angel investors in the world, currently the greatest angel investor active, because Chris Sacca and Ron Conway are retired. That puts me number 1. And you know what? I want to get better. And that's what angel investing is about. Constantly forcing yourself to make better and better decisions. Just like the world's greatest poker player, Phil Hellmuth, who I play poker with every week, he's trying to make himself better all the time. We have deep conversations about how to get an edge, how to improve your game, how to remove a leak from your game. And that's what we do on this podcast. This podcast is 10 episodes each season. This is our 3rd season. Thank you to our partners for underwriting it, because it's not cheap to have a studio. And trust me, Emmy Award-winning Jackie, producer Emmy Award-winning Jackie, and Sir Charles, they're not cheap to keep those kids around here working at a high level. Okay. My guest today is Matt Ocko. He's had an amazing career doing what venture capitalist investors used to do here in Silicon Valley, which is being brave and making difficult decisions with a lot of uncertainty and lacking a lot of information. Now everybody's a lemming. Everybody wants to see traction. Nobody wants to take any risk in this town. I want to know how you do it, Matt. How do you look at a company and a founder, and what questions do you ask them when they say, I want to save babies in NICU from dying using big data? This is a crazy idea. How does one evaluate that? Or you were telling me earlier about a company that wants to take drones that might be used for, say, terrorist activities or illegal activities and take them out of the sky, or big data and sensors to figure out, hey, maybe who's got a bomb in their backpack. How do you do it? How do you find out if this person can actually pull it off? What are the questions you ask?
So there are a couple of things that we look at. The first is we have to understand the difference between rocket science, which is actually funny because we're anchor investors in Rocket Labs, which just had its 5th successful orbital launch.
Congratulations.
On about 1/20th of the capital Elon raised to do the same thing, which we're particularly proud of. But we don't want to invest in raw science. So we're not ambling around Stanford looking inside of bubbling beakers or Berkeley or MIT. There has to be some tangibility to the technology.
Got it.
But product market fit can be uncertain. That's the uncertainty that we're willing.
To recap, product market fit means the customers love it.
Right.
And then doing science in a lab means you don't have to worry about customers. Customers are left out of the equation. You have a thesis, a theory you want to test, and you're doing the experimental method. So somewhere between customers saying, I love it, and the experiment that's done just for the efficacy and delight of the scientist. So what does that mean? They build a prototype, or they build a model, or their thesis is so good that you can't help but believe it because of signaling in the world? Take me through an example of how you came to a decision.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a couple of examples of seed investments, seed or early A investments that we made in crazy technology that's turned out to have a huge product market fit. One company, Embark, which is a leader in self-driving trucking, they demonstrated driving a truck effectively driverless. The driver's hands were only on the wheel for 5 minutes of a roughly 100-hour trip from San Mateo to Jacksonville, Florida, and back. And of those 5 minutes, almost the entirety of that time, the driver had unreasonably panicked just because they weren't used to a fully autonomous vehicle. There's a company that was recently photographed hauling loads with an Amazon logo on the back. And somewhere along the way of that crushing proof of self-driving trucking superiority, Sequoia became our co-investor. And
Big deal.
I think there are great things ahead for this company.
I have a video of it here. They can pull it up while we're talking about it.
The company in its earliest seed incarnation was trying to do campus go-karts or small self-driving vehicles. They looked like a Neuro or any of 73, small to medium self-driving companies. And we were uninterested, and we told the company that, and we walked them through our thesis that they were running into a buzzsaw of overfunded competition. And
specifically because they were going after individual cars, consumers,
individual cars or campus taxis or food delivery, and any of those things.
Yeah, too crowded.
We felt were asking for trouble, and we said, hey, trucking is interesting because it actually has less regulatory overhead once you cut the Gordian knot, which, by the way, this company has. They are cleared to drive on 90% of U.S. highway segments.
Wait, what's a Gordian knot? There's another term I haven't heard before. Is that some nerds?
Term from Greek mythology / history. It was supposedly represented the unsolvable problem, and Alexander the Great took out a sword and said, I'll solve the problem, and sliced through the Gordian knot and went on to conquer.
My kind of guy.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that approach.
He may be your
spirit animal,
your Greek archetype.
He's probably my ancestor. Yes,
exactly.
I've solved a number of problems just swinging a sword randomly at them.
So anyway, they're cleared to drive on 90% of U.S. highway segments. We watched the company move towards being able to do this, and then we made a sizable seed investment. And we had understandable metrics, not SaaS metrics, not, how many people did you get to use your survey app or DAU or any of that stuff. But we had bounded technical achievements that would tell us that this company was going to have a crushing advantage in a well-understood market.
Yeah.
And they hit all of those and more. So we led to A, and then when they fully rolled out their shock and awe, Sequoia led their B.
Got it.
So
shock and awe was what in this case?
Well, shock and awe was driving cross country effectively with no driver and actually having commercial contracts for freight delivery and fully autonomous vehicles.
So I get it. You're breaking down the problem into its component parts and saying, hey, if they win this, forget about the delivery or going up against Elon and Waymo with, self-driving cars and taxis and Uber and Lyft. But hey, if they win trucking, there's going to be a unique skill set there, and there's going to be a big prize if they do. If they fail, they fail. Whatever. It's part of the game. It's whatever, 1% of your fund or 2% of your fund, 3% of your fund. Is that what the average investment represents, a fund size?
No, it can be smaller than that. We actually still do honest to God seed.
What is honest to God seed in 2019 here in Silicon Valley?
100K, 250K.
Wow. Why have the top VC firms, leaving names aside, fled the seed space and gone on to say, hey, we got to put 10 million to work. We need to own 25% of your company. We need to put 50 million to work. What happened? When I started doing this 10 years ago, less than half the time you've been doing it, everybody loved writing 250, 500K exploratory checks. Now it's like everybody left the party and it's just like 5 of us on the dance floor.
Right.
And the music's great. The DJ's killing it. I'm loving it. It's literally like we have so much room on the dance floor.
No, I'm on your email list, and I can see why you're salivating.
It is perplexing.
So it is very labor intensive, and in fairness to our big brothers, I mean, it's ironic.
Former contemporaries.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic because we're tiptoeing towards managing a couple billion in AUM, but our bigger brothers are managing many times that. So
yeah.
We're still ironically very much the small kid on the block. In fairness to them, in more trafficked areas, there's also a signaling risk, ironically. You would think that with more people wanting to invest in SaaS or lightweight enterprise or consumer, that there would be less signaling risk. But there are so few firms that stand on top of the heap in each of those areas that if they don't follow on in an experimental check, which is what we call them experiments.
Right. Small check, you get to know the founder, you get to see them up close and personal. And because you have skin in the game, your eyes are going to be a little more open than just in a meeting. Is that right?
Absolutely. And everything about their supply chain, regulatory issues, customer sales issues, friction, every CTO, every chief science officer, every patent issue, every technology issue, you name it. It's like being a high frequency trading guy, sending out a little, pseudo trade every 4 microseconds, except we get the equivalent of months to years of investment understanding. And that's the reason that we still continue to do small investments. The entrepreneur does actually get the benefit of the full weight of our firm, and they can ask for our help at any time, but we generally don't take board seats when we do those things. That's a differentiation.
Yeah, that's going to be super time consuming to be on a board and do it properly.
And the way that we diligence is with a very unusual model. It requires...
Hold on. I want to know that diligence model for the small size checks when we get back on the Angel Podcast. One of the most important things for you to do for your startup is to have insurance. I don't know if you've been through this before, but I have. Errors and omission and cyber. That means if you get attacked and you get hacked, which everybody's unfortunately experiencing these days. And D&O. You've heard D&O. You've heard your investors throw it around. What does it mean? Directors and officers. That means the people on your board are covered in case the company gets sued because of a cyber attack or an HR issue, whatever it is. You need to have errors and omissions. You need to have D&O, and you need to have cyber. Well, the Embroker Startup Program helps startups do this, and I went through it with the founder. It is so easy. You just take a couple of minutes, you answer a couple of very easy-to-do questions, and you will get your insurance priced out immediately. You'll have access to 50 of the top carriers and Embroker's proprietary insurance policies. It's white glove service from expert brokers who specialize in high growth companies like yours. So you can instantly build your custom insurance right now, and you'll save up to 20% if you go to embroker.com/angel. That's EM and then the word broker, EMBROKER.com/angel. Embroker.com/angel. You need to get all this stuff dialed in. You need to do it right. Maybe you've been growing fast and you didn't get this set up because you're too busy. Well, it's time to take a pause and go to embroker.com/angel. Get that cyber insurance going. Hey, they even do things like cannabis and other insurance. Go to their website. You'll see it all at embroker.com/angel. Instantly buy that D&O, E&O cyber coverage in minutes, not weeks. That's the big thing here. Not only are you going to save money with Embroker, but you're going to save weeks and months of nonsense waiting for brokers to call you back and give you a quote, and they'll probably bait and switch you and charge you too much. So use embroker.com/angel. My good friend, Matt Ocko. I consider us friends.
Absolutely. We've known each other for the better part of 20 years, man.
We like each other.
Yes.
We like each other. We talk.
Indeed.
We've seen a couple movies together.
Indeed. We've wandered the streets of New York.
Wandered the streets. I mean, we like each other. I think, why do we like each other? What is it? Are you an East Coaster? What is it? We're just candid, no bullshit people? What is it?
Born and raised on the East Coast. Low tolerance for politics.
And nonsense.
Yes.
You and I get along on that. We're going to talk about politics in the third segment. Hold on to because it does relate, because our industry is being looked at through the lens of politics. But you said you have a framework for how to cut those 100K, 250K, very difficult checks. This is sometimes the hardest check to write because you have the least information, but you're also on the hook for now being connected to that person as an investor.
Yep.
Why is that a big deal for investors like us?
Well, so let's start out with the issue of diligence,
Yeah.
right? It's very easy if you're doing 250K checks to just throw spaghetti against the wall. And as you know, the statistics actually don't work in an investor's favor.
No, spray and pray does not work.
Exactly. So
in as an isolated investment thesis.
Exactly. So when we built our firm, we realized that we actually had to do real diligence on even the smallest checks. So what we did was we surrendered a significant portion of our carry to folks that we call equity partners.
Got it.
These are world-class CTOs, chief science officers, Nobel Prize shortlisters, heads of entire university departments, 3-4 times successful entrepreneurs. We have 70 of them across our firm with real carry. They are not venture partners. They don't fight each other over specific deals.
Ah.
It is one for all for one. And for the billionaires among them, the act of respect, of actually giving them carry instead of a disdainful bottle of Burgundy after they helped with something all the way through IPO, resulted in a lot of loyalty.
What is it, like half your carry you give them, a third? Or?
In our very first fund, it was close to half.
Wow.
And even in our larger funds, it's still a
Meaningful.
sizable handful of points.
Now, do they get it individually, or they each get 1/70th of that pool? Because it sounds like a scout program, which I was obviously the first Sequoia scout, famously. Or not so famously, depending on how you look at history.
Should be famously.
I feel it should be famous considering the numbers I put up. But I guess to people watching this, maybe it doesn't seem like actual legitimate fame. But for me, it is. Fair point. Do they split it evenly, or do they get like the juice themselves, or is there a pool, or both?
They're two tiers. There's no political games. And of the sizable chunk that's allocated to them, everybody participates in either one or the other of the two tiers.
Great.
Effectively pro rata.
It's really interesting because in the Sequoia investments, Sam did Stripe, Sam Altman, and I did Uber and DataStax and Thumbtack. And there are people who were part of that first 20 scout group who did either no investments or very like one.
Right.
And they will wind up making 6 to 7 figures in co-carry because they put a little 5% pool on the side of a shared pool. So I'll get 5% of, Sam's carry for Stripe, and everybody will get 5% of my Uber, DataStax, and Thumbtack, which is quite meaningful.
Yes.
So this has resulted in you using them as a lens, these experts, and you pick them based on historical relationships, or do you actually go out and scouts, as it were?
Both. So it's accreted credibility and relationship with world-class experts, which is why it's very hard for a very young fund or a fund of very young people to do this, because they don't have 20-year relationships with world-class experts generally. But we also do look for people on a kind of deliberate basis to enhance this group. We're not churning and burning people. They're very loyal to us. We're very loyal to them. But this is a massive force multiplier for our ability to quickly and thoroughly vet almost any technology that you can imagine. And also, even the professors have done at least 1, 2, sometimes 3 or more companies. So they're also good judges of people. All of these people are high IQ.
So it's almost like
high EQ.
EQ, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like you took what people used to hire, I understand, experts to diligence deals. So back in the early days of Silicon Valley, they would hire a scientist to go take a look at the thing and then just pay them $5,000 or $1,000 for like a day of work. And it was like the cushiest deal. What these diligence folks didn't realize was like that 5,000 might make a decision that might make 5 million,
right?
50 million or 500 million, who knows? Do people still hire diligence experts like that? Does that exist in Silicon Valley? Have you ever heard of it? And did you see it when you were earlier in your career?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that large funds did as part of a diligence checklist, and some still do. In the same way that we don't believe that it's wise to have a segregated seed fund because of the intellectual and communication barriers between the people who bury themselves in that for a living and then the people who run the next stack of capital. We also don't believe that you should outsource a ton of your diligence to outside experts, which is why we created this.
Why not?
You don't get accreted knowledge. You don't get historical. You don't get institutional memory, I think is the phrase that I'm looking for. But also, almost everybody, in fact, I would argue everybody in our firm is a nerd. We're, we don't own sports teams or multiple Ferraris or, small fleets of planes or anything like that.
Lots of Teslas, I'm assuming.
Yeah. One, mine, Elise. And we don't we're really very boring people.
Hmm.
We build deep tech companies. We have our spouses or significant others, our kids, where that applies, and a small circle of close friends. If we're out at dinner, we're talking about papers from the Association of Computing Machinery or IEEE or Nature, or we're talking about a really cool deal in somebody else's portfolio that just had an amazing breakthrough. And so that inner nerd flywheel is massively amplified by the equity partner nerd flywheel. They inform each other, they support each other, and we accrete knowledge. And this kind of virtuous spiral, self-sustaining competitive advantage, is also what we look for in these deep tech companies.
Fascinating. So you've modeled your firm after a deep tech company in that the capital and the innovation and all that knowledge just feeds back into it. So having the diligence in-house, having these scouts, you call them
Equity
partners who are deep tech. You have this incredible bench, and that leads to the data collective collecting data, which then gives you an edge. And your edge is the data and the deep science, because you're all nerds and you all want to read papers and get to first principles and really look for the bigger opportunities that are difficult to attack.
Exactly.
Speaking of,
very few, if any of us, will ever be invited to give a super slick TED talk,
right?
Or to pose for
A cover.
To pose for any kind of
Take
cover.
me to the first time you met Elizabeth Holmes, and what was the pitch like?
You know, I actually can't recall meeting Elizabeth Holmes, but I remember meeting a friend.
Balwani? No, a friend of hers.
No, I remember meeting a mutual friend who was unreasonably excited. And I said, okay, this sounds really impressive. And they've already rolled out. And I said, great. Put me on the IRB. Right?
Okay, explain what IRB is.
So an IRB is the initial list of, it's both a regulatory process and approval mechanism and the list of patients effectively. So if you're in the IRB, you're an approved patient under an IRB approval. So for example, if somebody is very early on in testing a new medical device at Stanford, they would file for an IRB. An IRB panel would consider the ethical and medical implications of what they were trying to do, and then approve a subset of a proposed patient population that could be part of an experiment or trial. So anyway, I said, get me into the IRB group and I'll try it out and I'll consider an investment. It never happened. And the excuses became more and more exotic. And so eventually I concluded that it was a fraud. The other thing is everybody from phlebotomists at LabCorp that I just kind of randomly asked about it when I was getting a physical to distinguished scientists at Stanford and MIT and Caltech and Berkeley and whatnot said it probably is physically impossible with any set of technology available in the next 20 years to extract that volume of information and to perform that many tests that accurately on that small a volume of blood. You literally cannot overcome the errors. It
would be like Elon coming out and being like, yeah, this is a 5,000 mile battery. And you're just like, what? 5,000 miles? Wasn't the last one like 150? Like how did we make that crazy step function? Did you like build a fusion engine or did you 100x solar panels and put them on the roof? Like it doesn't make any sense. And people still fell for it. What's the lesson there in the Theranos debacle? What you didn't fall for it. None of the other VCs of note in Silicon Valley did, to be honest. Like I know many VCs who they weren't able to see the core technology and they were like sign an NDA and it was so stealthy. Everybody was just like, oh, this is probably not real.
We all ran.
Everybody in Silicon Valley ran. It looks like a Silicon Valley disaster story, but it's not
a Silicon Valley disaster story. It is a it is more like the female version of the talented Mr. Ripley. It is a nice blonde white girl.
Yeah.
And it's important to note, if she were a woman of color, or openly gay, it is highly unlikely that she would have been given the endless courtesies and credulity that was necessary for her to perform this scam. So this is a nice lily white girl from a quote unquote good family,
right,
who scammed a bunch of even wealthier people.
Dipshits. Well, who are not even in the tech business.
But it's literally like some genteel, Newport, Rhode Island scam.
It's a grifter.
Yes.
These are grifters. It's what people don't realize. Like they look at it as like the example of Silicon Valley gone awry and Silicon Valley eating itself, or it's literally a grifter with a Svengali lover, this Balwani guy who was her lover.
Yeah.
People forget. Like, it's even more debaucherous and insane.
And creepy.
When her number two is her lover, and they're both on the board, and the board doesn't know that the two of them are in a relationship. And that is critically important disclosure, because they're obviously, as significant others at the time, going to behave in a certain way. And I agree with your assessment that if she hadn't been the tall blonde with the crazy blue eyes that pattern matched, but to me, when I saw it, I knew it was a fraud from the moment they said dropped out of Stanford, going for her whatever biology degree, pre-med, whatever it was going to be. And I just thought to myself, oh, I would not want my pilot or my brain surgeon to drop out of school.
Right.
But I have no problem with you building a web app because you dropped out of school and they were teaching you Fortran and Pascal in college. And you just thought, you know what, I should learn CSS and JavaScript and whatever. Like, that totally makes sense. But I dropped out to create a blood testing company.
Right.
Or I dropped out to do brain surgery faster and quicker and more innovative. Like, I'm not looking for an innovative, brain tumor removal technique that just flies against and disrupts the entire, face of biology. No, thank you.
Right.
What have you passed on that has the anti-portfolio pain? It's time. Matt, what have you passed on? What have you been in the room, been pitched, and that you just grind your teeth, and when you're at your offsite with your partnership, talking about how brilliant you are and the flywheel you've created of capital and expertise and knowledge and deep tech, and you're high-fiving yourself. But then the part when you have to be self-reflective at that offsite, because all these VCs do these crazy offsites where you have to kumbaya and figure out how you exist. What are the names that come up in the anti-portfolio that just make you bang your head against the desk and say, I am terrible at this? I'll tell you mine.
Yeah. So the weird thing is, most of my anti-portfolio is in my non-DCVC investment realm.
Got it. So they're not deep tech. Yeah.
They're not deep tech. Look, everybody misses stuff, but we haven't passed on any, $10 billion incipient unicorns, and it's a long game. I'm not going to name names. Some friends of ours had a phenomenal multi-billion dollar exit in deep tech. We're really happy for them. They're trusted co-investors. We love the team, and we're cheering them on because it means they'll raise another big fund and we can do more stuff together. We passed on that because the core application for the technology was already fully obsoleted by a stealthier company in our portfolio. So
conflict.
Not conflict. They do radically different things, but would you invest in an autonomous driving company, as sexy as it might be, if you had a stealth portfolio company that actually had practical teleportation?
Right. No.
Right.
I've invested in a VTOL company, and it works. And I've been in the VTOL, the vertical takeoff and landing. I've flown across the lake. I know that self-driving, cars are going to be toast when the VTOLs come out. No, of course I wouldn't. Yes.
Right. So because it's such a long game in deep tech, your friends can have huge successes and you're not bitter or jealous or put it necessarily in the anti-portfolio because you might have something just as big and beefy.
Got it.
That's going to leapfrog.
So they
them.
won the hand now, but you might win the longer hand. I get it.
Exactly.
So what about the ones you missed that
Right.
were not in your thesis? Because this is a really interesting discussion of should you have a thesis or not? And my position is different than yours. I am anti having a thesis because I believe that the best companies often are only fit into a thesis in the rearview mirror.
Right.
I.e., on demand, when the word on demand was codified, the
It was all
opportunity
over.
to invest in Postmates and, Lyft and Uber and Airbnb was over. It was 6-7 years later. Then some journalist was like, I know what we can call this. Or I heard a venture capitalist call it on demand or whatever you called enterprise, like lightweight enterprise or
Yeah.
whatever that. Would you call it lightweight enterprise?
Fluffy enterprise.
Fluffy enterprise? Non-deep tech. Shallow enterprise.
Yeah.
All right. So take us through why the thesis made you miss blank.
Yeah. So actually, I would say not so much a failure of judgment, but maybe adherence to ethics is painful.
Ooh.
Very early on, extremely early on in his career, a friend of mine in the consumer space introduced me to a young man named Evan Spiegel. And he sat on my couch and said, yeah, I'm having some friction with my very earliest investors. And, I've got kind of this crazy note structure. It's not a lot of money. This mutual friend and a couple of other people have said really good things about you. And, I see that you were early on in Zynga and a couple of other consumer companies. Could you buy out my note and become my largest investor?
Yeah.
And I said no.
Right.
And I said no because I was in the middle of slogging through raising what fortuitously in the end was a very oversubscribed day job DCVC fund. But I said, if you're mad at people for being unavailable or quirky or, exhibiting, the negative propensities of VCs, I'm going to be just as bad. I might be friendlier or I might, crack more puns when you finally get a hold of me, but I'm going to disappoint you. I can't in good conscience do this. I'm just going to piss you off.
Yeah. So to buy out a previous investor who they're not happy with, which I think was Lightspeed, it's public knowledge, but who knows if that's true or not.
No comment on who it was.
No comment on who it was. You can look it up on the internet.
Lightspeed are friends, references, and trusted co-investors.
Yes. Well, that's interesting because you didn't want to get them off the cap table, take their spot, and then be sharp-elbowed like that.
I also just didn't want to piss off the entrepreneur by replacing one set of folks who might have very good reasons for making him annoyed with somebody who is going to say and do the exact same stuff.
Right.
And now the good news is that even though Snap is not real at all our thing in our day job, I have had other companies that have dealt with them. And the goodwill from not being a predatory shithead has redounded to my benefit, and I still have a good relationship with so you
left 300, 400, 500 million on the table, but your reputation went up a little bit.
Exactly.
There's a lot of hand-wringing right now about socialism and anti-capitalism bent in America. What's your take? Capitalism broken? Socialism the solution?
I honestly think they're both broken. But
since you can confirm that socialism continues to not work. Okay, good.
Since you want to pick on socialism, socialism in any pure form, meaning when it's not social democracy, when you strip capitalism out of it, when you get Cuba, Venezuela, Cambodia, Russia under Stalin. the quip that I make about socialism is that we are all absolutely equal, ... in the grave. Now, that being said, laissez-faire capitalism is also immensely destructive, immensely extractive, immensely exploitative in its operation. And it also stops being real capitalism. It becomes a form of there's a good Greek word, kakiostocracy. It becomes an oligarchy of thieves.
Right.
Because you get regulatory capture, right? Like the banks who committed horrific crimes against...
And all got bailed out.
Right. All got bailed out. No one went to jail, right?
So capitalism without any guardrails equals eventually taking over the government because the government can be bought, and then it starts to tip over into an unfair capitalist-looking society, which are we there here in America, do you think? Or are we halfway there?
We are tiptoeing towards an outcome like the movie Elysium, in which the unfair advantages of the 1/10 or 100th of 1% become perpetually cemented by having exponential technological firepower and a relatively inexpensive surveillance state at their disposal.
Yeah.
And I don't want that future. The reason that I am a quote unquote capitalist is I believe that capitalism is the most efficient path towards something that I call, and I think a few other folks have called, radical abundance.
Radical abundance.
Radical abundance. It sounds utopian, but there is no reason that we can't live in a Star Trek future. Ultimately, capitalism wants to drive stuff towards a stable cost. Why shouldn't the stable cost of a safe society, enough to eat, equality of opportunity in education, in finance, in housing, be near zero?
Yeah.
It's not like there's a shortage of atoms in the universe.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a shortage of energy in the universe.
See,
and if those two are your inputs to almost everything that I described, why shouldn't it be frickin' free?
It should be, because when you think about it, I when I run for president, my platform is going to be free energy, free water, and free produce and vegetables for everybody. Because I think that we're at the moment where we're about to capture that. If you look, free energy, we're so close, right? Solar, wind, everything, nuclear, new nuclear. Then you look at clean water. Everybody's panicked with clean water. It's like Israel and the Middle East is like all desalinization. It costs like a fraction of a penny to desalinate a gallon of water. People are in panic about water. I get it. You don't want to waste water.
Well, we're driving that. We have both a new nuclear company and a radical desalination company.
Merge the companies, and then they should just be called the Energy Water Company. It's like there'll be, and if you have unlimited energy and water, you can put robots in a field to make vegetables for free. I have Cafe X as an investment, making food for people and taking people away from the misery of having to make 12 hours of coffee a day for a bunch of precious people who want to set the temperature and the milk froth level. Like a robot should do that, not humans.
Exactly.
And those same robots are going to be in the fields, pulling the stuff out of the earth for pennies. And right now, it turns out in the last 30 years for inflation, like food and other things, like if you take if you work 15 hours, do you know how much rice and vegetables and basic proteins you could buy for that? It'd be days.
Right.
Days of sustenance.
Right.
So just on the problem is we're not looking at it as days of sustenance anymore. We're looking at it as what car I drive, what phone I upgrade. So I go our desire to have things has surpassed our contentment with having a roof and food over our heads. It's a very weird moment.
I agree. And again, if you look at what we're up to,
yeah,
we have a company that has demonstrated it can annihilate the $212 billion chemical fertilizer industry.
Perfect.
With something clean, doesn't generate ocean and lake nitrogen killing runoff. That company is called Pivot Bio.
Pivot Bio.
Non-GMO, computationally bred bacteria that make corn, wheat, rice, and soy self-fertilizing
Perfect.
for a growing season.
By the way, Monsanto's outside. They're going to whack you.
Actually, Monsanto was our co-investor because
great.
the senior leadership in the company had, to their credit,
Yeah.
a change of heart and said, we need to drive massive innovation in non-GMO areas.
It's interesting you say that because I went to Monsanto. I did a visit there because they bought a friend of mine's company, and we visited, and they're kind of like, I don't understand why everybody hates us. Like we
feed the world.
We're kind of trying to feed the world, and we're agnostic. If people want to buy organic stuff and not buy the chemical stuff, or if they want to buy hybrid or non-hybrid, but like we've been hybriding everything on this planet for a long time. Humans, dogs,
Right.
everything is a hybrid.
Right.
Like taking two different husks of corn and, letting the bigger ones with the better, result and the better outcome. Like, why wouldn't you hybrid those and make bigger, stronger mules or corn or whatever? Tell me about nuclear.
Yeah, I mean,
This AOC with the green deal, and they took nuclear out of it. It's so dumb.
both Zach Bogue, my co-founder and co-managing partner, and I are big fans of nuclear. If you, there's a guy named Mike Schellenberger who writes for Forbes, who does a phenomenal job on this. The number of people who have and are going to continue dying from the coal and gas and oil plants necessary to provide true baseload power to purportedly green solar and wind is dramatically higher than the total number of people that could potentially ever be killed by the entire nuclear industry. Assume as many meltdowns.
Yes, a Chernobyl and a Fukushima every month. It's not going to kill as many people as coal is actively killing now. It's so obvious. And you look at Fukushima, that was a very old reactor. We're talking, 1950s, 60s design?
Yeah.
And implemented in the 70s, maybe? They put it below sea level. They were told, don't put nuclear reactors so they were told not to do that.
Right.
They built a seawall. They said, well, what if the seawall breaks? You understand, salt water plus nuclear reactor from the 70s, not a good combination.
Exactly.
And these idiots, I'm sorry, there is somebody who should have gone to jail over this. The fact that they kept that reactor running it wouldn't have kept people from dying from the tsunami. They would have still died. A tsunami is a tsunami. If people choose to live on the lowlands, that's the tragedy that every 200 years, some random act can happen. But to put a nuclear reactor in harm's way is unconscionably stupid.
I agree.
We could have reactors all over this country, all over China, all over Africa, and they're going to be in Africa and China, just not in our country.
Well, so
we're going to get any in our country.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about that. So the company that we backed with a very famous multi-billionaire idiosyncratic investor who is not Bill Gates. They're 5 or 6 to pick from. This reactor is provably physically safe. It is physically impossible to have a meltdown.
Right.
It fits on the back of a truck. It's the size of a container.
Right.
Can generate 5 to 15 megawatts. A free, in effect, million BTU of instantaneous heat for chemical and industrial processes and for desalination independent of the electricity it generates.
Yum, yum.
It's basically lights out, almost no human intervention. It burns waste. So you can show up at Fukushima or 3 Mile Island and say, give me your scariest stuff.
Yeah.
And we're going to turn it into fuel.
Love it.
It is proliferation and terror proof. So you can't saw it apart and scamper off with bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can basically take it off the back of a truck and give any village to portion of a large metropolis power for 100 years.
And nobody can chainsaw it and pull out the material.
Absolutely not.
It's sealed.
It's sealed.
Which makes obvious sense that would be possible.
It is not only possible, but they are within spitting distance of getting final approval to actually.
I got to
light
get in on this
thing
company,
up.
man. We're going to do another bridge round or something? Can I get a taste?
Can-
How do I
can-
get in on this? Can we
consider-
take it offline?
Consider yourself in, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
We'd love to have you.
All right, listen, Matt, it's been an incredible hour, and an hour has gone by. We need to have you back. And also, we got to get your partner on here at some point. Zach is a little podcast shy. I'll get him.
He's much more charismatic than I am. And in fact, on that nuclear point, he really has taken leadership on a global basis on the regulatory level. Really
this is what I
driven
want
a
to
lot.
get in on. I want to get on some nuclear action. I think we are such emotional creatures as a species. And when we start thinking like people think on Twitter, or these hysterical, pearl-clutching maniacs who are reactionary, we're not making the logical, intelligent decision about energy. The logical decision is to put as many nuclear reactors in the world as quickly as possible, because they don't burn a hole in the ozone. They don't release carbon at the levels of... I don't think there's any carbon, right?
They also, something that people ignore is, as much as I love solar and I believe it's a really important part and we need to continue invest and innovate in it, most current solar panels and the next 5 to 10 years of solar involves some level of rare earths, involves a whole bunch of CO2 generating mining. They're very difficult, if not outright toxic, to recycle or unrecyclable.
There are challenges.
And for folks who say, wind is going to be fine, you can't accept the reality of climate change, which massively destabilizes wind patterns.
Yeah, great. You put the windmills. You spent $1 billion putting windmills in Texas. There's no more wind. The wind moved.
Exactly. Or you have 200-mile-an-hour superstorms, which
would rip the things off. Yeah, the wings off them. The blades.
You don't want 150-foot ultra sharp composite blades in that kind of storm. So you need nuclear. And
why not? Why not build? I like to build extra capacity. Here's what I would do. I would build the 100-year plan, not this 10, 20-year fakaka nonsense.
Yeah.
Let's just decide why not have the abundance we talked about? Why not make energy go to zero? This would be a massive competitive advantage for America. If we just said we're going to put 50 new nuclear plants in America, and coal is the backup, and natural gas is the backup to the renewables backup, and now nuclear is the primary. And we now have unlimited. So when you're truck driving or Teslas or other electric cars, what if filling your Tesla was free? What if America gave an energy dividend to everybody? Talk about basic income. Yeah. What if every business didn't have to pay for their electrical starting next month?
You're singing our song, man.
This would be the abundance we need.
Yeah.
Because then people would say, "Oh, you know what? Our manufacturing plant for making jeans, 7% of our 7% of what we're doing is energy to keep the lights on here. Okay, we have no more energy costs. Great. We'll give everybody a 3%, 4% raise. Then they go spend that money, and monetary velocity goes up. People start spending more money.
Absolutely. You.
God damn it, people! Why are people not listening to us?
Are you applying for a stealth partner position at DCVC?
You know what? It's interesting.
You can be $1 a year, man.
I'm kind of like having. You follow the NBA at all? I'm kind of like having Rodman or Rasheed Wallace on your team. Like that might be an interesting experiment for a season or 3. And it might wind up, I might rip a lot of rebounds down, but I also might make the team implode. Like you really don't need a guy like me on your team. Trust me. I'm a solo act by design.
We'll talk to you about signing up as an equity partner.
Sounds good. All right. Everybody follow Matt Ocko. Ocko or Ocko?
Ocko.
Ocko.
Yeah.
Ocko. Ocko. And what does Ocko mean, by the way? What's the origin of that? I always ask people the origin of the last name.
It's a very, very old Russo-Slavic name, originally Ocko. Cyrillic O, Cyrillic K, Cyrillic O,
Ochko.
Meaning I or one who sees.
How appropriate.
Yeah, lot of weird history behind the name. The weirdest one, I'll leave you with this. The Archbishop of Prague was Jan Ocko. And my dad, Dr. Jonathan Ocko, used to be in Prague on business and try to get a restaurant reservation. And he spoke a little bit of Russian / Czech / Slavic. And they would say, oh yes, it'd be lovely to see you at this, nice little bistro tonight. And they'd say, what's your name? And he would say appropriately in Slavic, Jan Ocko. And they'd hang up on him.
Yeah. Hilarious. All right. Continued success. Follow Matt Ocko on the Twitter. He's good on Twitter. He's got an opinion. He's got a thesis. He's putting it to work. Congratulations to your LPs. Maybe I can sneak in and be a little mini LP here. All right. We'll see you next time on Angel the Podcast. You can visit angelpodcast.com. And if you write a review, that's awesome for our ratings. If you spread the word and just email this link, you watch this podcast, you got a ton of value, you made it to the end. Do me a favor. Just say to like 10 other founders, 10 other angel investors, 10 other VCs, just forward the link and say, great interview. J. Cal and Matt, what more do you need to know? All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.